welcome to Hope She Gardens and Homestead. I want to talk today about one of my favorite things to talk about and to do, and that is making bread. On the homestead, we make most all of our bread. Not always. There are times when we're rushed or having a lot of people over, and I will go buy bread. But definitely it is not anywhere in the same category as what you will make yourself. And not only is the taste amazing, but the smell that it puts in your home is amazing. Everybody loves the smell of fresh baked bread. I know that I have childhood memories of it. I know my children have memories of it. And my grandbabies are getting that too. My grandson loves homemade bread. His favorite are my everyday rolls that I make. He loves those. My granddaughter Serenity, her favorite is the cinnamon rolls. But everybody loves the bread. So I wanted to talk about that today. You know, bread has been around since the beginning of time. We're not quite sure who actually made the first loaf of bread, but we do know, though, that there were some excavations done in what was the city of Ur, there in Persia. If you have biblical knowledge, you know that Ur is where Abraham came from. He left there to go where God was sending him to. But they have excavated that, and they have found ovens that were like 3,900 years old. And not only did they find those ovens, they fired them up and actually used them in the making of bread. I thought that was just amazing. Now, in the beginning, bread was an unleavened bread. And then, you know, the Egyptians are given credit for learning how to leaven your bread. And so, whoever actually did it, I'm grateful for, because I love leavened bread. Now, there are times when I do make unleavened bread, a flat bread, especially around, you know, the feast days, Passover in particular. And but I do love leavened bread, and I do love sourdough bread, and I do make sourdough bread, but most people don't have a sourdough starter. Maybe that is something that we'll talk about in another video, but today I'm going to focus on homemade bread, how easy it is to make. It has been mystified, and everybody thinks that it's so hard to do. Now, a lot of people have bread makers, and that makes it easier for some people, but you know, my mother had one of those in her later years. She had a bread maker, and I would help her with making bread in her bread maker, and you know, I really didn't care for it, but it helped her have homemade bread in her later years when she couldn't actually make it. So, you know, they serve a purpose. But if you are able and you do have a desire to make homemade bread and to fill your home with that wonderful, wonderful yeasty aroma, I'm here to help you. So let's get baking. Now, I do want to apologize. I do have a very small kitchen. It's perfect for me because everything is right in arm's length. You know, I don't have to walk across an island to get to my stuff, or around it, or to the other end of the kitchen. I'm pretty much 3 steps away from anything in my kitchen, and I love that. Wouldn't change it. But it does make it hard for video purposes, but I'm going to do it right here so that you can see what I'm doing. And in fact, I'm going to make sure right now that you can actually see right here. When I'm making the bread, I may actually just put the camera down because that's what you're going to want to see anyway. Not me. So let's get baking. Now, for convenience sake, I have everything ready here. Have it all measured out. Now, what I have measured out is about 1.5 tablespoons of sugar, and I use raw organic sugar. I have 1 tablespoon of salt. I have a package of yeast, and I use the active yeast. And I have 4 cups of flour, but we probably won't need that much because I'm only making 1 loaf of bread. Now, I have my unfiltered olive oil, and yes, you can use any kind of olive oil. Doesn't have to be the unfiltered. I just prefer this. I like it better, and so Just put a little bit in there, and then you're going to make sure that your whole bowl is oiled really good with that olive oil. And personally, no, I would not use any other kind of oil, but if I did use a different type of oil, I would use coconut oil. All right, now I'm going to set that aside. Now, a lot of people will make their bread on a counter. They'll put their flour in a circle and start in the center, and I do not do that. I don't find it necessary. I have my good old Tupperware bowl, the large one. It's worked very well for me for years, so this is what I'm using. And we are talking about making it easy. So this is what I do. Because if you're like me, you're really busy and you don't have time to do a lot of the things that, you know, people that spend their whole day making bread because that's their job. We don't have time for that. So I'm going to start with a cup of flour. I'm going to put in my sugar, and right on top of my sugar, I'm going to put my yeast. Now I have a cup and a half of water, and I don't normally do this, but I just did this so that you would know the temperature that you want, and I'm hoping you can see this, is about 110. You don't want it any hotter, and you really don't want it much cooler. It could be 105, but you don't want it much cooler because that's what's going to make your bread rise. That's what's going to activate this yeast. That, and of course the sugar. But your water has to be the right temperature. So I just pour that in all at one time. That's a cup and a half. Cup and a half of warm water. And you will get to where you can put your hand in and you can tell, you know, you don't want it hot, you don't want it cold, you want it to where, you know, it feels good. And then I just take my whisk and I just mix it until there's no more lumps in there. There we go. Then I'm going to add another half of a cup, and I'm going to mix it around again, and this time I'm going to add my salt. I don't add it at first because even though your salt is one of your leavening agents, it kind of works against your yeast if you put it in first. So I always mix up my yeast, my sugar, water and flour first, and then I add more flour, and that's when I add my salt. Now I'm going to switch from the whisk to a spoon. And I'm going to start with one cup of flour. So far we have used 2.5 cups of flour. And then I just start turning it, and I'm going under and over, kind of like a fold, but not actually folding, but kind of like that. And getting it all mixed in. Okay. Now, you see how the batter is starting to do now? Now I'm going to add, this time I'm just going to add a half of a cup. Now I'm going to be adding half of a cup at a time until I get it to the mixture consistency that I want. In fact, now I'm going to go to my hands. And I'm going to go under and push. Under and push. That's what I'm doing now to get everything incorporated and blend in. And so in a sense right now I'm kneading my flour as I'm adding in what I need. You just turn your bowl. Okay, I'm going to put in another half a cup, and I'm going to put it around the edges, not actually on the dough itself. And then I just start going around, and a little will get on it at a time. Now it's starting to get not stiff, but it's starting to get firmer. So now, normally I would go to my counter, but because I want you to see, I'm going to get one of my cutting boards. So I've got a cutting board. I'm going to put some flour on it. I'm going to take my bread out, and I'm going to, any loose flour that's in there, I'm going to put that in. And then I'm going to start kneading. Get that aside because I don't want any excess in it. Push down, fold it over. Push down, fold it over, and I turn it. Every time I fold it, I'm going to turn it. Push down, turn it over and fold it. Push down, turn it up, and fold it. Now this is what I'm going to do until I get it to where I think it is where it needs to be. And there is a trick. Add a little flour. Now notice I'm just brushing the board with the flour, which you would do if you were on your cabinet. And pushing it, turning it. This is probably the hardest and longest part of making the bread. Now the texture's starting to change, and everything's kind of getting blended together and smoothing out. The yeast is doing its job. And the dough is really starting to change and turn into what you need it to be. Now there's a trick to knowing when you're ready. When I fold it up, you see how I've got this gap here? When it's ready, it's really not going to have that. It's going to be very well blended. Now the old wives' saying is, you know when your dough's ready because the bottom feels like a baby's butt. And yeah, that's probably true. Okay, but that being said, once you think that you have it where you want it to be, a testing will be pushing down. Whoops, let me get flour on my bread. Pushing down. And you see how that bounces back? There you know it's just about ready. I'm going to knead it just a little bit longer. I think it needs a little bit more. Not much. Now you can really kind of tell the difference in even the texture. It's very smooth. It's not a lumpy, and it's bouncing right back when I push in. So this is where I want my bread to be. So now I'm going to bring my bowl that I had greased with the olive oil, and I'm going to put this side down, give it a good turn in there because I want it to be oiled, and then turn it back over. So now that the bottom is actually in the bottom, I go around it to make sure the oil's all the way around it. And now I'm going to just put a cloth over it. You can set a plate over it. And I set it in my oven out of the way so that, because my oven's usually kind of warm. If your oven isn't warm, you know, if you feel like it's too cold, like it's winter time or something, you can turn it on and just get it to where it starts to warm up. Turn it off because you don't want it too hot. It'll kill your yeast in there. So you just turn it on just till you start feeling the heat. Actually, that's a good way to put it. Just till you start feeling the heat coming on, then you turn it off. Then you can set your bread dough in your oven to rise, because you want it to double in size, which will be in this bowl is about right here. And when we get to that, I'll come back and let you see that. Okay, it's been about 40 minutes and the bread has risen. It's got a very pretty top on it. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take this pretty top and you're just going to mush it down. Mush it down all the way around. You want it to get out air bubbles, and you turn it over, push some more. Then we're going to cover it up, put it back in the oven, let it rise again. Okay, so it's done its second rise. We're going to push it down again. Now I have my pan here. It's a cast iron pan that I like to use. It's a flat iron. And now I did lightly oil it. It's very well seasoned. I'm going to take the dough out, and I'm just going to start folding it up on itself, kind of in a ball type. Okay, once I get it the shape that I want, and notice that I pushed it down, getting all the air bubbles out of it before I started. And then you just get it into the shape you want. How pretty is that? I know that's silly, but I do think that bread dough is pretty. Once you get it in the little ball, or you can make it a long one. You can make it any shape you want. But I'm making a little ball this time. Now, I do like to come across the top and make some markings. Now, you can make 3 markings this way, you can make 1 like that. You're going to let this rise now for about 20 minutes. And then you're going to put it in the oven. And once it hits the oven, in fact, let me turn that on. We want that on 400. And once it hits that oven, the heat's going to kind of spark it. It's going to do a little bit more rising even after we let it rise now. Now, it also does some interesting shapes. You know, like I said, you can do the 3 slits like I did. You could do a cross and a heart. You could do a cross, you know, like that. It's going to allow the bread to expand, and it'll ensure that you don't get any big pockets of air on the inside. So we're just going to let that rise. And not for very long, about 10 or 20 minutes. You just kind of judge. You're not wanting this doubled. You just want to let it rise. And that's something that you're just going to have to judge. 20 minutes is a good time frame. If you want to just set a time frame, 20 minutes is a good time frame. Alrighty. Now, there are a couple of things that you can do that I do not do. This is basically an Italian bread. So when you get this formed the way you want and you put in your slits, you can fix an egg wash. That would be your egg whites from an egg and a tablespoon of water. Mix that up real good and brush that on. It'll give your bread a glaze and it'll look very, very pretty. And unless I'm wanting to show off at a dinner or something, I don't do that. Another thing that you can do at this point is put a pan of boiling water on that bottom rack in your oven, because this is going to go in the middle. On that bottom rack, put some boiling water. You can heat it up in your tea kettle and go ahead and have the pan in there. Pour the boiling water in there and then set your bread dough in to cook. Now, the reason you'd put the boiling water in there is because it gives it that extra push of rising in your bread. And if you're wanting a traditional Italian loaf, that would be the way to go. But again, that's something that I forego. And you know, and I told you when we started, I'm going to show you the easy way to make bread. If you don't use all those frills and stuff, you can make bread really quick, and you'll find that you don't mind making it. So I'm going to put this in the oven. I'll cook it until it's about golden brown, about 20 minutes. I heated it up to 400, and I'll show you what it looks like when we pull it out. Okay, so here's our finished loaf. Now, one of the ways you can tell, because sometimes it'll be brown on top and you'll think that it's ready, but the way you can tell is to look at the bottom. If the bottom is brown and crusty like this, it's ready. If it's washed out and hasn't turned brown yet, put it back in and let it go a little while longer. Now, at this point, there are several things that you can do. Now, what I like to do is I put it on the rack because I don't want the bottom of my bread to get soggy. But I'm going to cover my bread because as it cools off, because I like a soft loaf of bread. If you like the hard crusted bread, leave this off and let it air dry. Also, if you did the egg wash, you know, before you let it rise, if you did the egg wash, now would be a time that you would put the egg wash on again for the second time. And otherwise, you're through. You've got a beautiful loaf of bread. And I wanted to talk to you a minute about the flour that you use for making bread. Can you use just regular all-purpose flour? Yes, you can. I always buy unbleached flour. Now, I use King Arthur flour, and I use the bread flour, which is in the blue and white package. King Arthur's flour is color-coded, so to say, and the blue one is for making bread. And King Arthur flour is unbleached, it is non-GMO, most important, and it's a high-protein flour. The protein is what makes your bread rise, so you know that you're going to get a perfect textured bread when you use a good bread flour. Now, King Arthur is, I believe it's 12.7% protein. That's a high protein, and that's going to give you a good rise, it's going to give you good texture, and it'll give you a very pretty loaf of bread. Flour does matter when you're making bread. Hope that you make your own bread. Now that you see how easy it is, you can mix it up, you can put it in the bowl to rise, you can go off and do whatever it is you need to do, some chores, clean house, work outside, you know, whatever. It takes about 35 to 40 minutes for that first rise. Then you can punch it down, put it back into rise. You can go off, do some more chores. That one doesn't take as long, 20, 30 minutes. Then you come out, you form your loaf, you give it about a 20-minute rise, and then you put it in, and it takes 20 to 30 minutes for it to get done in the oven. Altogether, it doesn't take that long to make bread. It does take a little bit of effort, and after you've made it 2 or 3 times, you'll get the process down. It won't be any big deal to you, and your family will appreciate it, and so will you, because nothing's better than a homemade loaf of bread. Nothing smells better. The smell right now is just intense and soothing. It is very soothing. So I hope that you make bread. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope that you come back and join me again. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Give me a thumbs up, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.